problems facing New Zealand's primary sector have been mounting at a rapid pace. So I think it's time for open hearts and open minds.
Welcome to Sarah's Country, where open hearts and open minds are the start of progress, but bold, brave and courageous action is another. Now, history is a great leveller, I've found, for those that are all talk and those that, get on with business regardless of the noise. We can turn around and look back down history at the boldness of our celebrated brand's journey, such as Sinlay, A2 Milk, Zespri, Icebreaker and Comvita. The knockers were louder than those knocking on their door at the time. But in true humble Kiwi fashion, they believed they were onto something. A strong value proposition that a discerning global consumer would prefer over the current offering. Now, for those of you new to Sarah's Country, I'm your host, Sarah Perrier. Welcome to the show where we broadcast first live Monday through Thursday from 7 o'clock in alliance with Farmers Weekly, New Zealand's favourite weekly rural newspaper that provides in-depth agricultural journalism. Now, on my nightstand at the moment is a book by Jeff Ross and Justine Troy, and it's called Every Bastard Says No. It was their journey building iconic vodka brand 42 Below Vodka. Now, I highly recommend the read of this book, The Trials and Tribulations in Building a Brand. They didn't demand someone did it for them from the sidelines. Now, tonight I wanted to reflect with our industry leaders on some longer form, more in-depth interviews on their thoughts on how we're placed not only to have great visionaries for New Zealand's food and fibre sector, but to have the ballsy capability to achieve a new level of prosperity beyond our current expectations. Today it's reported that Elon Musk has surpassed Warren Buffett in net wealth. Now, one extremely ambitious beyond belief human being, and the other a very stable tortoise that wins the long, stable game of strategic conservatism. We can continue to be price takers, easy as, status quo, or we can finally get on and be the market makers that we're destined to be. But it comes at a price. Taking a risk when every bastard says no. It's great to be back with you for another week in New Zealand's digital-first rural media, turning up in every nook and cranny that our audience wants to listen to or watch us when, how and where they want. So thank you so much for being the most supportive audience a girl could ever ask for. We did our quarterly reporting today, believe it or not, since we started Sarah's Country, and I'm so honoured by the amount of people that are tuning in across 15 different platforms live every day. 10,000 plus unique listeners and viewers on demand later every week. It's just crazy. I trusted my gut and you've blown my expectations on what is capable when you just show up and you just get on with it every single night. So thank you so, so, so much from the bottom of my heart. Now, tonight on Sarah's Country, I've taken a small, bold little slight pivot to try something new. We've only got 3 interviews tonight because I wanted to just go a wee bit deeper with these industry leaders to get some more honest opinions on what they think our future holds. Pre-recorded in studio this morning whilst on campus on other business, Rob Hewitt, both co-chair for Silverfern Farms and chair of Farmlands Cooperative, shared with me, and we'll have that after 7:20, his thoughts on why regenerative agriculture is a part of our future and how we define it around the vision of Te Taiao could be our golden ticket. To close the show after 7:40, Chief Executive for New Zealand Merino, John Brackenridge, is going to share his thoughts on how farmers who invest in a long-term consistent strategy that is consumer-led should deserve a premium. He will also share his passion for ballsy leadership and why urgent action is needed now, all after the release of course Wool Industry Project Action Group Vision and Action Plan for New Zealand's dire strong wool sector. On the theme of wool, I'd love to know, what is the one thing you own that's wool that you think is the best thing ever? Now, Joel Rock went snowboarding for the very first time this weekend, and I want to know, Joel, you would have had a few layers on up Mount Hutt. I know it was a sunny day, but any wool?
Well, that's not my mate. I don't know. I think I had a woolly hat on. I don't know if I had like some underlayers that had bits of wool in them, but it wasn't pure wool. Yeah.
I've got a question for you, and this is quite personal.
Oh.
We are live across the globe. Did it smell at the end of the day?
Well, I certainly did.
Because that's a very good tip to know that you're wearing synthetic.
Oh, really?
Because wool breathes and doesn't hold odour and bacteria.
My old school blazer mustn't have been wool then. We all thought it was, but it smelled like a wet dog by the end of the day.
There we go. So, of course, the theme of wool tonight. What is the best thing that you own made of wool? I'm going to tell you one that you wouldn't think of. My latest, dryer balls made from wool. Joel's face. Crisp, the most crisp sheets that you ever find. Joel, have you ever heard of dryer balls? These are the best thing. Dolly's actually using them as a little bit of a toy. She shouldn't really be. But you chuck them in the dryer and they bounce around and they suck the water out while they're drying, and then they punch it all up at the same time and fluff it out.
Oh, right, okay.
So
I'll take that, yeah.
I know many of our regulars in Sarah's Country will have seen a lot of inventions in wool products, and there's some fantastic ones coming out, even wool coffins. You know, I'd love to know in the comments below. Let's celebrate how far wool's come in certain different areas. Now, first up tonight, we're going to kick off discussing the progress or lack of we're making as a country post-COVID. In the country with our drastic skill shortages, with Matt Jones from Agri Training. We're about, it's not about how we grow this capability. It's where we're going to take it from there. Now, all that after a wonderful on-farm story that Mr. Rock, our producer here, has chosen. True character of the Banks Peninsula, Roger Beattie, an innovative man who seeks to farm wekas. This is Sarah's Country.
We lose a lot when town people don't understand what farming's about. One of our roles with the products we're producing is to connect farmers and the public who buy our products back to real things. The more they appreciate what we do, the more they'll buy from us. We're Roger and Nikki Beattie. I'm an enviropreneur and farmer's husband, and we're in Lansdowne Valley, Canterbury. Where we are now is Lansdowne Valley. We've got 32 acres here. It's a lifestyle block. We've got our kelp and our sort of headquarters of what we do with our blue pearls here as well, and our wild wool operation. And then we've got 2 farms on Banks Peninsula, one at Arahua, 800 acres, and then another farm opposite Akaroa, and that's 1,700 acres there. We're farming sheep and beef organically and regeneratively, so we don't put any chemicals in or on any of our animals. I got into the sheep business originally when I went to the Chathams in the 1970s. I culled 3,000 wild sheep there, and when I left, I thought, heck, these sheep are tough, we must farm some sometime. So when we bought the farm at Kowai Vale, we got some wild sheep out from the Chathams, and then we started farming them. None of them had any diseases. Very few of them had dags. None of them had a lambing problem. Their feet were perfect. Their mouths were perfect. So basically every time we bring them into the yards, it's to make money out of them. Now that's pretty easy care and enjoyable farming.
Weka weka what? Weka weka what?
You can't be on the Chathams and live there for as long as I did without having an empathy for the weka. So I started to get that conservation sort of mindset. So when we moved out here, we set up New Zealand's first predator-proof reserve, and we've been successfully breeding wekas since 1993 here, and we've given away hundreds. We're starting to commercialise them. This is a weka feather in our wild hat here. Lots of chefs really keen to put weka on the menu. Weka's so good, much better than chicken. They're easy to farm, they like people, they're tasty. The feathers are useful. They'll eat a variety of food. You can have them in an orchard situation or a grazing situation. There's a lot of reasons why we should be farming weka, and no farmed species has ever died out. We decided to put a marine farm on the edge of our boundary in the water, and we needed kelp to feed paua because they're a grazing animal. Then we started getting the kelp and drying it on rocks and crushing it on our food. Friends would say, well, heck, that's nice, can I have some? And then it just slowly grew into a business. We've got human grade Valere, we've got animal and horticultural grade called Zelp, and then we've got a new product which is called Flour, which is very, very fine kelp that we suck out of the air from our processing. And it's so fine that it'll go through any sprayer. We've been worshipping at the altar of productivity for too long. We should look to nature, not try and beat nature. The regenerative farming movement that we're involved with now is the fastest growing movement of farmers in New Zealand. And we're communicating. We're getting better at what we're doing. It's an infectious disease like laughter. It's catching on.
Now, there's an invention when it comes to, of course, sheep and wool. The Pitt Island sheep that Roger Beattie's running there, and of course was selling flat out into Canterbury restaurants, shot to order prior to, of course, COVID and the effects going on there. But Roger's an absolute treasure and such an absolute character, as innovative as they come. Now, of course, we're talking about innovations in wool, and I'd love to know, I know that a certain Tim Black may be watching Sarah's Country tonight and hosted a fantastic event yesterday in Hector Black's, talking about the wool industry and how we can pivot and innovate when things have never been so low in terms of strong wool prices. I'd love to know some of the cool innovations. I mean, I live in my all-bird shoes, of course, a fantastic innovation. Joel, did you realise that there's a young fella who made wool Band-Aids?
Uh-huh.
Could you imagine that? Wool Band-Aids. Wool has so many properties that we all know in the farming community, and of course set to be able to grasp this new consumer trend towards, of course, world's most sustainable fibre, you know, instead of having petrol close to our bodies. I'd love to know your comments below, as well as, I'm not sure about you seeing on the news, the biggest crisis is that the people can't understand why there's no courgettes in the supermarket. When did we get so disconnected to our seasonal vegetables in terms of what we can grow and what we can eat? It started off with cauliflowers, and that COVID affected the price of cauliflowers, and now we're on to courgettes, $22 a kilo at the moment. Well, we don't need to eat them. And I'll be talking to our next guest further in the show, Rob Hewitt, around is it time we do the same with lamb? Scarcity equals demand and equals a higher price. Now, dairy and horticultural industry leaders are relieved following changes by the government to rules for migrant labour. Farmers Weekly reporter Gerald Pickard focuses on this week's newspaper and the decision that Immigration Minister Ian Lees-Galloway announced a 6-month extension for migrant worker visas. I know it was much welcomed by Dairy NZ and the 3,000 workers that affected. There's also a reduction in the stand-down period from 12 to 6 months for these lower skilled workers who are due to leave this year. But is that going to make a difference? There's talk about crops rotting in the fields and stretched workforce working unhealthy and unsafe hours because of these border closures. Now, joining us to discuss is Agri Training's Matt Jones. Good evening, Matt.
Hi, Sarah. How's things?
Yeah, good. Hey, Matt, can you provide us with a bit of a picture of what you're dealing with in your role in vocational training in the sector day in, day out?
Yeah, look, we're certainly seeing people are resetting their dial and are looking at the primary sector for a future. And I think there's even, if you talk to real estate agents, there's been quite a shift in in townies wanting to move to the country and become a bit self-sustainable. And we're certainly seeing it in the job market as well.
Yeah, hopefully they'll learn that courgettes don't grow in July. That would be quite a good. Now, there's our aspirations in our government high enough. I mean, we had the Fit for a Better World aspirations of 10,000 jobs in the next decade. Nathan Guy seemed to think 5 years ago we needed 50,000. I'm getting a bit confused on the numbers. How bad is it in terms of what we need in the sector?
Well, look, I honestly think we need a hell of a lot more, and I don't think 10,000 is the right number. We need to become more intensive. We're a boutique. We need to sell a specialised product around the world and not be a commodity producer. And to do that, we need more labour. We need more skilled labour from and I mean labour on the farm, right through the whole primary sector. There needs to be a big uplift in training and bringing people up to speed.
Interesting you say that about that boutiqueness and that, you see in the wine industry here in New Zealand, because it's hand-picked, it actually commands a premium over harvested. And if we're going to be moving more and more into that, I'd like to know, are we training for jobs of the future?
No, yes. Are we training for jobs of the future? What is the future? Yeah, we are, because a lot of it is just hands and, work, graft, hard work. Yes, we need tech people. We need to lift middle management. We need to lift the knowledge base. But we do need from the hands, from just grassroots working. So I think we are training right, but we've got to keep looking at what we're training and how we're training, because the people we're training, the younger generation in particular, they certainly have a different approach on how they take in that training that we deliver.
How much has the visa restrictions affected and had a flow-on effect, and has these recent changes made a difference?
Yeah, they have, and they'll certainly help people that are in genuine skill shortage areas, and the comfort factor that they have got another 6 months. The unfortunate thing is Immigration New Zealand are sort of sitting on their hands and making no decisions, which is not a good thing. Then we've got an election, so there'll be still no decisions. And there's a lot of people offshore that have the right to work in New Zealand, but can't get back here and can't get back to their job. And there's certainly quite a number of cases, and you've done some stuff on that as well, about those sort of people.
How much is the $1.6 billion going into free apprenticeships and vocational training going to benefit your business and the capability of speeding up what we need?
Potentially, it's probably not going to benefit our business at all, because we don't deliver NZQA. We deliver an Australasian qualification here in New Zealand. So we are a private funding and funded by employers and employees. But it is a case of you pay for what you get, and we're certainly delivering a really high-end education model. But we are working with MPI on some funding on some rural retrain, and we had a really successful classroom session a couple of weeks ago.
So what more do you believe needs done in the short term to ensure that we don't have too affected, especially rural contractors and through to, of course, horticulture and viticulture? We need to talk to schools more. We need to get more engagement in the primary sector, and we need to keep championing the primary sector as the sector of the future. And it's not the dirty farming. It's the growth. It's New Zealand's backbone, and we need all ages in it and getting involved in it. Mm. Thank you so much for joining us, Matt Jones there from Agri Training. Hey, Matt, before you go, off the top of your head, I know you're from mid-Canterbury and you've been obviously surrounded by a lot of sheep farmers in your time and seen the demise of the strong wool industry. What's the one thing you've done recently to purchase that's wool to support the industry?
purchased a woolen jersey just recently, and I wear it every weekend on the farm, and that's fantastic.
Oh, and so therefore you'll be able to back me up when saying to Joel that wool doesn't smell like wearing synthetics.
That's right. No, absolutely. It smells when it comes off the sheep, but it certainly turns around and it's all good once it's been washed and on a jersey.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. That's Matt Jones from Agri Training, of course, off the back of Gerald Pickard's article there with regards to seasonal workers' decisions welcome by Immigration Minister Ian Lees-Galloway. Now, coming up in Sarah's Country, we're going to be joined by Rob Hewitt ahead of his opinion piece in Farmers Weekly this week about how regenerative agriculture could actually be beneficial if we are both consumer-led and science-based. All that up next in Sarah's Country. This is Sarah's Country.
One of the first things you learn when you live out here
is where to shop for the things you need to live out here.
like electric fencing,
or horse feed,
or bee suits.
Children.
Chook food.
Do you want a couple of these?
Or something stylish to wear. Not everyone's got stuff like this.
But at Farmlands we do, and then some.
So if you need anything to help you farm,
Grow, milk, drench.
Rhea, come on in.
Because we're out here too.
Well, consumers have certainly latched onto the term regenerative agriculture. You know, whether they fully understand it or not, or even given it the old sniff test to see whether New Zealand products are already regenerative, it's certainly causing a stir in the New Zealand primary sector, from soil scientists all the way through to marketers. But of course, our consumers are paying attention to where their food is coming from and the rise of food insecurity post-COVID-19. And in his latest opinion piece in Farmers Weekly this week, Rob Hewitt, co-chair of Silver Fern Farms and chair of Farmlands, as well as sheep and beef farmer himself, has written his thoughts on why we need to be paying attention to this and joins us now in studio. Thanks so much. What drove you to get to the point of taking pen to paper on this particular topic?
Oh, it's sort of been... COVID-19's given us lots of time to reflect when we were on lockdown on the farm, and you really highlighted it in your intro, actually. I mean, it's become obvious to me, and I think to many, that the consumers who were quite complacent in where their food came from have suddenly realised a couple of things. Firstly, they didn't have a relationship with their food producers, so they were taking it at face value that the food that they ate was safe and verifiably safe. And when COVID came along and disrupted that supply chain, all of a sudden I thought, perhaps I better get a bit more engaged in this. So that's the first point. They are looking for a relationship. And look, to be fair, with regard to New Zealand producers of food and New Zealand consumers, the assumption that food is safe, I think, is fair enough and sacrosanct, I think, but not necessarily the case when you go out into the big wide world. So that would be the first point. The second point is that consumers for a while have been, particularly offshore, have been concerned about the safety of their food. And it's just reached quite quickly, I think, a tipping point, or it's approaching a tipping point around. And that's where this all came from. You know, regen, when you're offshore, my view is that consumers of our food see New Zealand as being largely regenerative in its pastoral agricultural processes right now. Mm-hmm. You know, and indeed, when you look at regen and what they're espousing around preservation of soil, multiple species in a sward, rotational grazing, you know, intervals returning back to paddocks, you know, that's largely what a lot of us are doing as sheep and beef and dairy farmers today. Mm-hmm. So the whole thesis behind this was really, how can New Zealand position itself in the eyes of the world to give the consumers in the world the food that they're looking for by just more clearly articulating what we're doing today.
And that is the point I think you make and many make around this debate is there is no ability to tick a box. And we're so used to in this industry being given guidelines and minimum standards to adhere to for access to supply to these markets. And of course, Silver Fern Farms have a lot of those programs. So how are we going to understand what is regenerative already and what is not? Because there's a lot of things you mentioned in here that New Zealand do, monocultural cropping, artificial fertilisers and herbicides.
We don't do those. And when I'm talking monoculture, multiple cropping, soy, maize cropping at scale offshore, that's absolutely monocultural. And you need the herbicides and fertiliser applications to keep up with that. And you're in a bit of a downward spiral when you get to that point. I think New Zealand hasn't quite got to that point yet, and largely that's by accident of the the amount of rain and the fertility of the natural fertility of the land that we've got. Grass-based pastures, farming systems around the world is quite uncommon. We think it isn't because we're in the middle of it. But really at scale, when you go globally, the only countries that can do this consistently are ourselves and Ireland. You look anywhere else, they can do it. The States, Canada, Australia, South America, South Africa, they can do it for parts of the year for a period of time, but they can't do it consistently like we can. And that's what consumers are looking for. They're looking for what they perceive to be healthy farming systems, and they look. If people have visited New Zealand, they see New Zealand largely delivering what they assess regenerative to be. Because, quite frankly, not many consumers understand what regen is.
No, of course not. So why are we fighting over it here at home?
I think it's the uncertainty, and that's part of the definition issue. Because if you can't measure it, you can't quantify it. If you can't quantify it, you can't manage to it. And the opportunity that we've got in New Zealand at the moment, in my view, is that we can define this in our image, in our own, you take the natural opportunities that we have in our systems already, that are already effectively regenerative, add to it where we don't, and that's the question mark is what is that, and that's what the definition is about. And we can make informed decisions about, well, do we want to go down that path or not? But let's take the best bits of both and put it together, because we're doing it largely now anyway.
What are some of the benefits of where we can lift the bottom up into being more regenerative, and particularly around soil erosion, and of course also our protection for ongoing droughts in terms of soil water holding capacity and things like that as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, regen quite sensibly, in my view, talk a lot about single pass tillage, direct drilling. I've used direct drills for years on my farm, and for part of my farming system, not entirely. But I guess the quid pro quo with that is glyphosate. I do use glyphosate on my farm.
And so do regenerative farmers.
Yeah, and yet it's held up around the world as being was it Monsanto or DuPont? I can't remember. One of the big companies just recently has settled a $16 billion claim, I think, for glypho use offshore. The reason being it's cheaper to stay out of court. I think that's completely the wrong reason. I can understand their pragmatism, but at the end of the day, it doesn't set a good scene for the rest of the globe if glypho has a place to play. And under regen, I think it still does have a place to play if used appropriately, as does artificial fertilisers if used appropriately. And that's the challenge.
So therefore, we have had such an output-based auditing system with Overseer, and this freshwater management is very largely input focused in regards to things like nitrogen cap. The farmers who are trialling parts of regenerative agriculture are motivated by these higher standards to make sure that they're improving water quality and soil runoff and sediment and things like that to meet simple regional council. If the method to the madness to achieving the regulatory standards is parts of regen, then why should we care? And if it's in terms of enhancing their farming system that they know intimately well, why does regenerative have to be a threat?
It's not.
Yeah, so in terms of your this is your point in the opinion piece. Yes.
Yeah,
so,
no, this
exactly.
Is it. Look, I have never experienced an opportunity where consumers are saying, we want what you have got.
Yes.
We have a once in a lifetime opportunity to package it up in a way that they are looking for to premiumise it.
Right.
And that is the free pass.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay, so that's the point as well, is package it up to premiumtise it, is your words, and the frustration is that, but we can't define it. So Damien O'Connor said last week, about the controversy I put to him around his regenerative mindset in the framework, the Fit for a Better World. And he said, well, why do we have to call it regen? Why can't we call our farming systems te taio? What do you make from this roadmap that was released last week?
Oh, I like it. I've had a little bit to do with it on the periphery, but from a commercial perspective, I think it's really great. That's New Zealand's regenerative standard, in part. I mean, it's wider than that, but as I said earlier, when you go around the world, the only two countries I think that do pastoral livestock production sustainably and consistently is Ireland and New Zealand. Ireland already has their Project Green or Origin Green, and te taio is our equivalent. Now, what te taio allows us to do is to package up what New Zealand does really, really well, but with the unique New Zealandness of that. This is not a Project Green Me Too. This is more than that. This is New Zealand's opportunity to market its food as a unified sector to the world, and I think that's incredibly positive. It's not going to fly in the face of any of the programs that Silverfern Farms or Alliance or Fonterra or whoever else is marketing the food to the world is currently doing. The two can coexist together. And the way I see te taio, it's a standard that goes across the entire sector. Any of the individual programs that the companies do by themselves sits on top. So it's like an and rather than an or. But very clearly, I think consumers, and with regard to te taio, that helps us start to set the standards. The industry needs to take responsibility for this. And we need to set our standards, because if we don't, we will have them set for us. And my experience is that when you have standards set for you, they tend not to be in the scalable, achievable at a level that you would have done yourself. And quite frankly, our consumers aren't looking for a purist level of regenerative farming either. They're looking for what they consider to be regen, and quite frankly, I don't think they really know. So we need to tell them what it is in our image, backed by te taio, as an industry food and fibre standard for New Zealand, and market it to the world. I think it's a huge opportunity.
Okay, so there's a lot of arguments around how we can put a scientific framework, and I understand MPI are looking to support funding into that framework for regenerative agriculture in New Zealand. Do you think this will be an opportunity for everybody to come together to form what that minimum standard is of accreditation, as opposed to fighting against each other?
It needs to be. And that's going to be the challenge. You know, we've all got to work together on this. And there's there's a window of opportunity here that we need to take advantage of. It would be in the industry's best interest to work together on this, so the food and fibre sector needs to work together on this. Because if we have regenerative farmers with a very pure view of the world, and we have high-intensity systems farmers in the dairy sector with their view of the world, and they don't talk to each other, we're not going to get any change. And in the meantime, 2 years down the track, the world's moved on, and we haven't taken the opportunity out of that.
All right. We've talked about this before with regards to you wanting to see a premium attached to some of our ground beef that goes in to leaning out some of those US beef patties. And there is always going to be that commodity market for what doesn't meet that standard. Do we define premium double and quadruple over commodity to incentivise a bigger enough change, do you believe? And the other point is around that access to supply and Fonterra's obligations under DIRA still not clarified, and so therefore, and you have a boomer crop harvest like avocados, we have to get rid of them somewhere. So how do we do both?
Well, I mean, it happened in the wine industry a few years ago in Blenheim when there was a huge glut of Sauvignon Blanc, and it got to the stage, I remember it very well because I was doing some consultancy work in the Australian Liquor Channel at that stage. And the decision point came down to, do I, as a wine industry, do I sell my complete harvest to Woolworths in Australia, and they'll private label it for price points from $4 a bottle to $20 a bottle? It's the same juice. So work that out. Or do I tip it into the town's sewage system? Because by doing that, I know I'm cut my nose off short term, but I'm going to preserve the brand value of Sauvignon Blanc in New Zealand. Now, as it eventuated, neither of those two things happened, but they were sort of the two extremes. And my point really is, at the end of the day, what we do with our pastoral systems, we are producing my favourite saying, we are producing Mercedes cars here. It's the equivalent of that. This is top-end stuff that we do. Around the world, we're going to have many, many consumers that will never be able to afford our product. And quite frankly, we're wasting our time marketing to them because they will always go after cheaper stuff. It's all about price. But we have a distinct segment, and that segment is growing, and they want our product. We need to make sure that we market our Mercedes at Mercedes prices. Now, if we act in a commodity fashion, we're in danger of never quite getting there. Having said that, I know for a fact that our commodity 95CL beef does attract a premium around the world. And the reason it does that is because it's got a very tight specification that allows that confidence from the manufacturer that they are putting good quality product into their burger patties. Now, this provides an opportunity to extend that a bit further. The answer to your question really is it's horses for courses, because for some items like commodities, there'll be an opportunity to perhaps get a small premium above where we are today. For other branded product, and we don't do enough of that in my view, there's a huge opportunity. So it'll be a mix and a match depending on what the cut is, what the market is. But ultimately, I think when you're benchmarking against current performance, anything in addition to that has got to be a good place to start.
And we do have a shelf life on these products as opposed to a Mercedes as well, for the aspirational type element in terms of moving stock throughput, especially within the livestock game with climatic pressures and conditions of that as well.
That's true. I mean, I'm sure the Mercedes guys will argue that a 1974 SL Mercedes is probably not the same as a 2021 SL Mercedes, so they'll argue shelf life too. What I'm really saying is we aren't selling Daewoo's here, guys. But too often the whole industry has been caught up with the idea of we've got to get this product gone, so we'll drop our pants on price, and that just buggers any opportunity to premiumise stuff next year. We've got customers sitting offshore. I've seen this, supermarkets in Europe that will sit there like piranhas at the bottom of the waterfall or in the drinking pond waiting for the zebra to step in, because they know every year New Zealand producers are going to stump up in March. There's a glut of product and the price just tanks. Why don't we get away from that?
We're too predictable.
Well, it's seasonal. We're on a pastoral grass curve. That's not going to change. But how do we premiumise other aspects around it, around our farming systems, around the way that we do business, around the way that we manage our animals and manage the welfare of them? Package it all up.
Do you know what I'd like to see? Scarcity being brought into the play of marketing, and why do we have to supply lamb year-round?
Look, I agree. I think there's significant opportunity as long as the demand pulls it through. So this has got to be consumer-led. But if demand pulls it through, there is no reason that New Zealand lamb or beef cannot occupy the same space that bluff oysters do here. There is no reason for it. But we do have to grow demand ahead of supply. And that's one thing that Zespri has done extremely well with gold kiwi fruit, is limit the amount of licenses that are available so that they can keep a track of supply and make sure that their demand forecast through their promotional programs and marketing calendar has got more in it than the ability to fill it.
All right, rather than a minimum standard pan sector, can we make Te Taiao an aspirational license like Zespri, and the fact that your farm gets Te Taiao approved to supply, therefore disregarding what makeup you want of product on there, and you're not sitting under a silo. So if you want to have a mixed multi-land use system, regardless of what you change and who you supply to, you're a Te Taiao licensed property.
Yep.
There we go.
Why not?
Okay, we're going to send this on to Lane Jaeger and Damien.
He's already thought of it. Yeah.
There we go. Of course he is.
That's absolutely true. That's where it needs to be.
Absolutely.
That's a standard.
There we go.
Yeah.
Of course he is.
A minimum standard.
Yes.
Ultimately.
Yes, absolutely. And it's aspirational for those farmers as well, and that feel-good element as well, that they've achieved that particular accreditation. Now, I'd absolutely love to end this on your line about we must be both consumer-led and science-based. Do you believe that we've been either one or the other in our thinking?
Look, we've sort of both and neither, really. I guess where we have been, and I'm talking production, livestock, pastoral livestock production here, but it's true, and that's either milk or meat. I think really where our focus over the last forever has been production driven. We've been throughput driven. It's about how do I extract more value from my land, and by and large, that's been about producing more widgets. That's not consumer led. And to be fair, when I think about cooperatives owned by the farmers, they have actually caused half of this issue, because cooperatives have been, when I think about the meat game, it's been all about how do I take the volume of livestock that's being provided to me by my shareholders. I'll worry about selling it later on. Right now I need to process it. So it has driven a throughput mentality, a volume mentality, which is not about product differentiation. It is not about brand. It is all about deal with today, not tomorrow. And in my view, we've got to take our responsibility for that and look to change it. So I think the industry is getting more consumer-led, but we've got a long way to go, a hugely long way to go. Unilever or all of those branded FMCG companies around the world will look at what we're trying to do and laugh. We're one set of very limited SKUs, and we've really just started down this journey, and the investment that we put into it is minuscule compared to them. So have we been science-based? Yep. On the everything that we do to support that production throughput-driven mentality. I think under regen, the two can sit together. I listen to what some of our scientists and whether they're soil scientists or animal scientists, what they're saying about regen, and I look at what the regen guys are saying, and I think we're arguing both sides of the same coin, actually. There is no question in my mind, however, that we need to listen to our consumers, and ultimately they will pay the premium that we deserve. There may be a bit of a gap between their willingness to pay and our ability to supply, and it's a bit of a leap of faith, but we've never been in a better space to actually take advantage of that right now, because they're looking for our food. They want our systems. They understand, well, they think they understand what regen is. They like it. They haven't thought about it too hard, but it sounds like when the world was a less complex place than it is today, and New Zealand looks like that place. When they go to their happy place, that's probably New Zealand looks like a happy place.
Oh, what a lovely way to end it. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your opinion piece from Farmers Weekly this week, Rob Hewitt. Now, coming up in Sarah's Country, continuing on the theme of brand, we've got CEO for New Zealand Merino, John Brackenridge on, and his thoughts on this Wool Working Group report out last Friday. All that on Sarah's Country.
This is Sarah's Country.
Hey, where you going, man?
Even if you really, really wanted to, and you had a bunch of spare time and nothing better to do, even if you were overcome by some strange desire that you couldn't explain, even if you were determined to do it no matter what, we still think it's unnecessary and, to be honest, probably not a good use of your time. But yeah, technically, you could meet your shoes.
Hi.
But that doesn't mean you should. All birds wool runners, cosy runners made from wool.
Well, New Zealand wool is a quality product. We all know that. And our farmers are some of the world's most significant wool producers. But declining commodity prices and an increase in cheaper synthetic materials has led to it becoming unprofitable. Now, on Friday, the recommendations from the past 2 years of a wool working group established by Minister Damien O'Connor were finally released. And joining us now to discuss on Sarah's Country is longtime Chief Executive for New Zealand Merino, John Brackenridge. Good evening and welcome to Sarah's Country, John. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Good evening, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be on. Such great feedback in terms of how your show's going, so it's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Now, John, firstly, I think before we indulge into this, the recommendations of the wool report, which I know members of the New Zealand Merino team have been a part of, could you give us a bit of an update on where W3, or Wool's Unleashed as it's known, the Primary Growth Partnership Fund, 22 million of co-investment into fixing the strong wool sector through New Zealand Merino?
Okay, well, first, if I can just do a distinction there in terms of your opening and saying blanketing all wool in terms of unsustainable. Of course, there is a distinction because fine wool, as a consequence of all the effort that went in over there for a number of years, is particularly strong and has been strong. and has got very good contracts in place. So I guess the distinction of this conversation is about strong wool. And so in terms of the project that we're working on, Wool Unleashed, that's just gone through an independent verification and validation. We are really excited about the strong wool industry. Just like with fine wool, it's going to require a lot of investment. It's going to take more and more growers coming on board. But the whole notion that is written into that report about this as a precious fibre, as a natural fibre, and in terms of what's happening in the world, has got huge potential. So then your question is what are we doing? What's the work? We've been developing more and more around the attributes and the benefits of this. We've got some key brands now, like we have in fine wool, now starting to roll out in strong wool. If you see around me here, you'll see the Glare Up shoes. These are incredible. They're Danish design. There's something like 100% premium for the grower. And it's going on in alongside the likes of Allbirds, where wool is going into whole new categories. So if we look at the new categories, we'll be launching some new inventions, new uses for wool over the next few months. They've taken, like with anything, time to build up. But in terms of immediate impact, I continue to be excited about wool going into and getting recognised back in the interior markets. You know, when Icebreaker came along, that wasn't necessarily a reinvention of or an invention of some new technology breakthrough. It's just getting the story across. And so what we've been working on is how we can get that story through into the interior textiles markets, or with the likes of carpet and upholstery and so forth.
Okay, so they mentions here in this Wool Working Group report and vision for a roadmap that we need validations to direct our investment from consumers around strong wool. When will we have a collective New Zealand wool story as opposed to the definition that only a lot of us within the sector know?
Well, I think, what the report is saying is absolutely right. Historically, I think there's been too much focus has been done at a trade level. This is saying we need to now move into a far more sophisticated world, go and do consumer insight work, understand what's important to our consumers, and then develop the stories and the products and so forth to go with that. And I think it's terrific and open if that work can be done collectively and then shared across the industry. And then at that point, commercial entities, those that are prepared to step up, will step up. And, that's what we're doing. I guess we're probably now one of the biggest investors in strong wool, alongside the substantial investment that we do in fine wool. And we would encourage others to really take as much of the knowledge that comes from those insights and apply it to their sophistication of marketing as possible.
We talk about investment from growers, and of course that's what the fine wool industry did some 25 plus years ago. How on earth do strong wool farmers invest when it's a race to the bottom in regards to returns at the moment?
Oh, well, that's very easy. They come to us. They have the same model as fine wool. The growers that are supplying us are contributing with a 4% marketing and innovation fee. That in turn that's what we're investing. That's why we've got these new markets. That's why we've got this new innovation occurring. But I think, sitting back and saying, well, let's get somebody else to do for us. The growers that are running with us, just like with fine wool, they've said, we'll step up, we'll invest, and then it's over to us as a business to make sure that those returns come through. Now, in the report, that's right, this is going to happen over time. What's a little bit different here is that, we're a smaller part of the industry, but we're growing all the time. But it will happen as a consequence of investment and as a consequence of growers backing those organisations that are prepared to market and co-invest with them.
Where would you like to see Crown investment in regards to wool research and wool capability, John?
Well, I like the current model. I think co-investment where alongside individuals, alongside companies, alongside growers that are prepared to step forward and invest themselves, then to me that's demonstrating skin in the game. I don't think that Crown should just come along and say, hey, here's a gift. I think the industry has to step up like we're doing, and therefore co-investment is absolutely the way to go.
And one of the last recommendations in this vision report is establish a governance and coordination capability. That just says bring back the wool board, does it not?
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure because obviously I haven't been involved in that, but the bit that I got some confidence in with regard to that report was the outside-in approach. I think if we feel that the current industry is going to sit there and be able to come up with a solution, then I think we're really missing an opportunity, and that opportunity is for really successful enterprises who are competing in this modern world to come in and to have a look at us as an industry and say, you know what, here's what you should be looking at. So it's really, I think it's dangerous if we get the industry ourselves in isolation just to say we'll come up with a solution when the industry has got us to where it is. I think it's awesome to avail ourselves of outside-in thinking.
Yeah, I said to Damien O'Connor last week, John, that if anything that's good that's come out of it so far is a little bit of organisation with the National Council of Wool Interests coming together and coming out of this. Are you starting to see collaboration actually occur now because things have got so dire in terms of price?
Well, we've always been working in a collaborative manner. If you'll see that, with Fine Wool, with the trade, the exporters and so forth that we work with. I think that the opportunity for collaborative approaches is certainly there, but I think it really needs to be done alongside coming back to co-investment, where you're really co-investing in much more sophisticated ways of taking our product. So what do I mean by that? Doing the consumer insight work, coming up with the stories, coming up with the products that suit those consumer needs, then backfilling all the way. And I think one of the really important aspects of this that I think the trade really has to grasp is a transparency between that end market and the farmer. So the grower is aware as to what these companies are paying, so that all the good work that is occurring there doesn't get trapped at one level. It actually finds its way back, because it's just imperative that New Zealand farmers are rewarded for the incredible job that they do.
I'd love to know what your brand partners think of how dire that strong wool market has got when they recognise the value of wool in general to their brand.
Yeah, and in simple terms, they know that if the payment is not going through to the farmer, then they're not going to have an industry, they're not going to have supply, and that's why we're working hard with them to provide the points of difference so that they can justify the price points, and then together we're giving back substantial premiums. You look about the products that are around me here, there's about 100% premium over the current market that's going back through to the growers. The people from this brand, they come out, they meet with the growers, and we're very open with regard to what they're earning, how the whole transaction happens. And I think that's a very modern way to approach this, and I think it's imperative that New Zealand's sheep farmer shifts very, very quickly into these new type of models, because I'm really concerned what's going to happen to the New Zealand hill country if we don't get far more profitable models happening.
John, lastly, while I've got you here, because it's great to have you on the show, of course, John Brackenridge is CEO for New Zealand Merino, of course, also head of the Tohono boot camp for many, many years, and the release last week, John, of the Te Taihao roadmap. I'd love to get your thoughts on what you've seen in industry leadership to see out this vision and implement it into a way that we farm and market our product.
Yeah, really good question. I think we've probably got one of the best opportunities that we've had in decades as a country to reset and to shift from volume to value. And if you have a look in terms of how there is a convergence of consumers now becoming much more aware of what they eat, much more aware of what they wear, then New Zealand has an incredible opportunity to better sell our story. But Sarah, if you come back and you have a look and say, how many branded products do we have in the food industry? If you think of Denmark, or you think of Germany, or think of Switzerland, they've got these wonderful brands that help position their country. But New Zealand, at this point, really doesn't have much in the way of products that help position us. And I think there needs to be so much more sophistication in our branding and our storytelling so that consumers can actually buy New Zealand products in the value-added manner.
What would you like to see for the rest of this year, John, in regards to our progress made off the back of COVID?
Absolute urgency with regard to what's currently being talked about. There's plenty of narrative. What I've just said to you, you've probably heard on the show a whole lot of times. Where I think we need to be distinctive is not in the what or the why, but in the how. And I think that really requires businesses to be stepping up and investing in the how. And Sarah, the main thing is to get some early runs on the board with this new direction. I think we've got to go for progress over perfection. We can't afford to wait. We need to be able to come in, and I'm looking forward to coming back on your show in a few months' time and saying, here is a proof point, here's a proof point, here's a proof point. Enough of the narrative, much more of the exemplars.
Music to my ears, John. I had Chris Parsons, the new CEO for Rural Leaders, on the show last week, and what an absolutely outstanding, distinguished gentleman in terms of leadership in the sector. Do you believe that we have the balls to be bold enough?
Oh, here's a question.
To see out your vision?
I think it's going to take courage to be able to do this, and I've met a whole lot of people that are in this industry, and I just think it's more like they've just got to have the confidence, and they've got to have the governance around them that's going to support it. But Sarah, they need to have the urgency. I just really want to reinforce the absolute urgency for this. If we don't move now, I believe that we as a country could really regret not only that we've missed the opportunity, but actually that we haven't in fact grasp it, and in fact that we actually shift more and more dependent upon our traditional commodity approach. So again, reinforcing, let's move fast, let's get the exemplars, let's talk about them, let's learn from each other, and the more that we get these exemplars out there, the more success, the greater the effect is going to be for transformative change.
Fantastic way to end that. Thank you so much, John Brackenridge, as I said, the Chief Executive for New Zealand Merino, talking off the back of the wall working group report released last Friday. Well, New Zealand wool is a quality product. We all know that. And our farmers are some of the world's most significant wool producers. But declining commodity prices and an increase in cheaper synthetic materials has led to it becoming unprofitable. Now, on Friday, the recommendations from the past 2 years of a wool working group established by Minister. Now, I believe that that may have restarted. Our apologies there. Me and Joel were just kicking back, re-watching another interview there from John Brackenridge, CEO from New Zealand Merino. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on Sarah's Country tonight. We're going to be back again tomorrow from 7 o'clock. And if you've missed any of the previous shows, feel free to go and check us out on podcast. Just search Sarah's Country. That's all you got to do. And give us a subscribe, so you get up-to-date notifications as soon as there is new episodes. And of course, get in touch with us anywhere across social media under Sarah Perium or Sarah's Country, and send me an email, sarah@periummedia.com. Produced in alliance with the great people at Farmers Weekly. Check them out for the latest stories in agribusiness at farmersweekly.co.nz. Good night, go well, and we will do this all again tomorrow.
This is Sarah's Country.